Awesome. Well, super excited to chat today with Caroline about book proposals. I believe these are a sometimes this mysterious document or resource that's out there in the publishing world, and some people kind of know what they are. Some people have feel like no idea what they are. So we are going to just kind of break down all of the maybe myths today and at least take away some of those barriers of understanding what the heck a book proposal is and why it's so important for authors taking any publishing journey to really think about a book proposal and how it can help them down the line. So Caroline, if you want to just start really briefly giving an intro, tell us a bit about yourself and then your work as a book coach.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me, Erin. It's really, I'm excited to talk book proposals because I love book proposals. And like you say, people, I think, are afraid of them or nervous about them or just avoid them at all possible. I enjoy them because they're kind of the business side of writing. I don't think they're that hard, but I think because they're so different from what writers do as writers, they can just like be this really freaky thing. My background, I am Chicago based, but I'm from Philadelphia originally. I like to say that I'm proud to have grown up in Philly, but I really love being from Chicago now. And I have a background in academia. I was a professor for some years. I taught high school Latin in a previous life, and fell into editing, developmental editing and coaching a few years ago when people were actually asking me for feedback on manuscripts. And I kept saying to them, I'm a historian. I can't really help you with that. Yeah. And then realized that actually maybe there was space in the editorial world for someone like myself who didn't actually enjoy the writing, but kind of had accumulated all of these skills as a grad student, as you know, in the academic system. And so now I get to help people. Particularly, I work with women who write nonfiction, but I work with nonfiction writers who they do the hard work. I don't anymore. I just get to sit and read good books and cheer people on and help them get better as best I can, and then take them through to a book proposal and try and get that book out into the world. And I appreciate that you said like book proposals are for people who are in all different publishing paths, because I think there's benefit at different points, and you can draw from a book proposal even if you're self-publishing, or, you know, if you want to go to a big five, you have to have one. So there's a whole range of reasons.
Yeah. And I've been on the publisher side before. Yeah. So I've seen like plenty of proposals, and I've seen some proposals that are like really great. And as like sitting on the publisher side, we're like, oh my gosh, like this is a book we have to have. And then I've also seen the proposals where we're like, like it's okay if this one doesn't work out. So in your opinion, what makes a proposal a good proposal versus a bad or like a meh proposal?
If only there were one answer. Yeah. I do appreciate, though, I mean, from your perspective, I think proposals are really easy to get wrong. It's really easy to write a bad proposal. And like you can just kind of throw some things out there and line up under some bullet points. But it's not that hard to write a good proposal. I think one secret, and it's a secret to writing, it's a secret, I know you know this is the secret to like marketing, knowing your reader and always keeping them at the center of that proposal. And in the proposal, it gets a little tricky, right? Because there's now two readers. One is the reader for your book, but the other is the person like yourself in the publishing industry who's reading it and wants certain things. So you're serving two very specific people, but you're not trying to serve everybody. And so figuring that out is key. And I also think that one of the challenges, and I kind of alluded to this a moment ago, the proposal is a business document. Your book is not a business document. And a challenge that I see sometimes with writers is they want the proposal to be jazzy. right? Like they want like, this is my style, this is my personality. And like, there's places for that in a proposal.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, it has one clear goal, and that is to sell your business, which is your book, to the buyer, which is the agent, the publisher.
Yeah.
And they got to like you, but they also have their certain needs that they need to have met. And so like, if you are like really like pumped and awesome and exciting, but like you never quite say what your book is about or how long it is or who it's for, you know.
Yeah. I think sometimes authors, it's not that, I think they maybe just don't realize or think about the fact that, you know, publishers have a bottom line. You know, they're also a business trying to, you know, employ people, make a profit. And so they're looking at these proposals through the lens of what's going to make our business money and be a worthwhile investment, like for our business. So I love that you're saying that about it being a business document, because for a publisher looking at it, that's just 100% what it is this a good business investment or not? And how are they showing me or trying to maybe persuade, you know, me as a publisher if it's a good investment or not?
And I think that's the part that freaks writers out.
Right?
Yeah,
fair enough.
Because it's like, I'm a writer. Even I work with writers who are in business, who are in finance, who are in corporate spaces.
Yeah.
They still don't want to write the business document because that's a separate world, right? My book is my book. It's my creative output. It's my authority statement. It's my message to the world. Oh, I don't want to do the business side of it, which is, as you know, at this point in 2023, it is a huge part of being a writer.
Yeah.
Is the business side.
Definitely. So thinking about it like as a business document, and like, what are the different elements that need to be included in a proposal to really make it stand out, or to really show a publisher / agent that this is a worthwhile investment?
And thinking business wise, we talk about having an elevator pitch for your business. Your proposal needs an elevator pitch. It needs a hook. You start a proposal with a title.
Yeah.
It's got to be a great title. It shouldn't be, I've talked to writers who are like, I'm sure somebody will change my title later, so it doesn't matter what my title is now. Like, oh, no. You're like, you got to have this title. I want you to love it 100%. It's got to be so exciting. When you tell people this title, they get excited by the title. Like, that's the level you need to start with. It's got to be a title, and it's got to be a great title and a hook. And then from there, other key pieces of the document, you've got an overview of your book and your place in the current moment, right? Who you are, why you should be writing it, and why this book, why now? Yeah. And that overview, depending on what a publisher is looking for, what an agent is looking for, maybe it's a page, maybe it's 2-ish pages, maybe a little longer. Unfortunately, everybody wants something a little bit different in the publishing industry. But that overview, that summary, no matter how long it is, the first line, that's it. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they were saying that I think it's like 15 seconds is the average attention span. That's what you get. Yeah. And so your title, your first sentence of that overview, you got to come out of the gate hot. And, now somebody's interested. Now they're going to read through your argument. Now they might listen to the story that you want to tell them. And you've got to be tight. You've got to be clear. There's spaces in a proposal where you're going to talk really clearly about your reader. So again, you got to know who they are, where you're going to find them, where they're going to find your book. Really clear conversation about how you're going to market that book. Going back to this business idea. Trying to think. I lost maybe the beginning of that question. Now I'm going down a list of things that are in a book proposal. I apologize.
No, that's like really all of the key elements. Because I feel like most authors, unless they've been unless this is not their first book, I feel like no one knows really what should be going into a proposal. So I feel like it's it just maintains this like elusivity or this like mysterious veil, so that you're like, oh, like a book proposal, like that's what, just like throwing in my my title, my cover, but like knowing all of these different elements like the overview and all of these like how to like adjust it for the market, I think is really helpful.
Yeah, I mean, and I think the problem is, right, we're so inclined to Google things these days. If you Google what goes in a book proposal, you're going to get so many different answers because everybody wants something a little bit different. So at least when I work with writers, we have like some key foundational pieces.
Yeah.
And then we can add and subtract as different agents or publishers need. As you look and you decide that this agent that you want to pitch to, that agent needs, 150 word pitch at the start of the proposal. All right, we can add that in. Some academic presses, and actually I'm seeing it actually outside of academic presses now, I don't know if you've seen this, are asking for keywords, which is a whole different thing. And so, I will say that's not something that I normally work on with clients, but some writers are now encountering in nonfiction, particularly requests for 6 to 10 SEO keywords as part of a proposal. So you can add and subtract pieces, but at the core, you've got a title, you've got an annotated table of contents, right? Short, your overview, your audience analysis, your marketing, your, so I don't forget, I have it in front of me, your bio, right? Who are you? And not a bio like starting from the beginning of your life, right? The bio, relevant parts of your life to this book, right?
Yeah.
It's the business. It's like, your CV, they don't need to know where you worked in high school. In your book proposal, they don't need to know where you worked in high school. Also, often the same things to omit. And then the other piece of having your manuscript specs, right? Because in nonfiction, you might not be finished your book yet. It might be in progress. And so being able to say, it will be this long and it will take me this long to write. And honesty in that space is important too. I think sometimes readers get afraid and say, oh, I can get this done in 2 months. And, as you know, the publisher wants the honest answer there. They're not going to penalize you for not having the fastest answer.
Right. I think especially with some publishers, I mean, they're looking to fill like publishing gaps, sometimes 2 or 3 years in the future. So I think I love that note about just like the honesty in the timeline, because a publisher is not trying to put your book out in the next 4 months. Like they're
as much as you'd like it out in the next 4 months.
Probably looking like 2 years minimum, unless it's like super timely and they want to like rush it in. But I think it's so interesting the keywords, and that some publishers are now asking for that, because it really like goes to show how like there's aspects of the proposal which, when you're thinking about like the whole publishing timeline, comes so early. But that's how early now, like even some of these marketing tactics and strategies are being introduced, which I think is, as a marketer, I'm like, yay, I love hearing that, because it really helps, I think, an author start to like switch the mindset a little bit from writing a book to then thinking, oh, I need to figure out now, like, how is this, once it's a finished product, going to actually get in front of people, whether that's through organic SEO keywords, to, oh, I need to start thinking about my strategy for growing an email list or getting higher social media engagement. So I do think it's so fascinating how it starts to connect at that point in the process, even when authors may not realize, I'm still writing the book, but now I need to start already, even if it's a couple years ahead, thinking about marketing.
Yeah. And again, it goes back to writers who are like, let me be a writer, somebody else do the marketing. And no, you have to know, you have to be upfront. You have to, you were saying, Erin, that like, right, publishers in the end, they have a bottom line. They also, part of your job as a writer is to help, to say, hey, here's the strategies, right? I'm not relying on you to invent 100% of the marketing strategy. I, as an author, am already taking ownership of my value as an author. And I'm going to say, hey, this is how you can market the book. This is where I'm thinking. And those pieces in a proposal are so illuminating and valuable for the author. And that's what I mean by like, even if you, in the end, wind up self-publishing, if you can sit down and you can lay out a clear analysis of your audience and a clear strategy for how you're going to market to them in a book proposal, That's work you've now done for yourself. It's not just for the agent or just for the publisher. It's for you.
Yeah. I think that that's having the plan, almost like that roadmap of sorts is so helpful. And I feel like that could just be its own topic, is, why it would be important for someone who wants to self-publish or is choosing to go the self-publishing route to still go through the same motions as someone who's going the traditionally published route, at least to an extent.
I think so. I mean, and again, coming back to reader, don't tell me everybody's going to love your book. And I think if you sit down and you work on a proposal, you have to spell it out. If you hadn't spelled it out before, which I think you should have, but by the time you sit down at a proposal and you have to say, here's who the reader is, here's what they look like, here's the places they are in social media, here's the other books that they read, here's kind of the world they exist in. That's important for you as a writer. It's important as you write the rest of your book. If you're still drafting, it's important in your revision. It's important for yourself when you are going out and doing, you want to go to your local bookstore and do a book reading. They're going to say, who's going to show up?
Right.
And it's not going to be like everybody I've eever met.
Right.
Because it would be awesome. And I feel really like terrible sometimes saying that, but like.
Right. No, because I think as I share that same philosophy, and I'll put that out on social media. I feel like at least like once or twice a month, I'm putting out some sort of post with that same concept.
Yeah.
And it's just always like, it's always one of the biggest like fights and like the biggest points of tension is like, you can understand it, but then actually then like loosening the grip and saying, okay, I'm actually going to follow through is like the hardest thing for an author to do. But I'll tell people, like, I know like a good friend of mine, he's an entrepreneur. He started his own business. He, loves being active, loves going to the gym. But I know the types of books that he likes to read. They're not business books for like entrepreneurs. And they're also not like health and fitness books either. So it's like, you would think, okay, everyone's going to enjoy or find something out of this maybe lifestyle book for, for entrepreneurs or small business owners. Yet I know someone who is both of those things who would never touch that book. So it's like knowing then how to be positioning it and speaking so that you're not just trying to throw, spaghetti at the wall at, everyone who you might think will like this book, but actually saying, no, I'm going to reframe things in the way that my target reader actually is going to like understand that I'm trying to speak to them.
Yeah, exactly.
I think you were kind of just alluding to the idea of doing a proposal maybe ahead of the actual like full book writing. What would you say, what would the advice be for someone who maybe hasn't started the writing process? Would you say go through the motions of the proposal first before going through and getting kind of words down on paper?
Well, I mean, full disclosure, that's actually how I work with nonfiction writers, is I start with a proposal before I start with pages of the text. And the reason for that is because everything that goes into a proposal can actually then act as basically an outline to your book, right? Yeah. Sit down and take time to figure out what the title is. Okay, that's the start of the proposal. Figure out what the table of contents is, even if you're not the kind of person who enjoys outlining. There is value, I think, especially in nonfiction, of saying, all right, these are the concepts I want to cover. I'm going to organize them into 8 chapters. I think this is what the 8 chapters are going to be. And to really do like a minor upfront annotation of that, to say, all right, chapter 1, it's going to cover in like 2 sentences. And to be able to sit with that and kind of workshop that is really helpful. To write down who that reader is, like we're talking about, to think about where you're going to meet that reader before you start writing. I'm sure marketers like yourself love when a writer shows up and it's like, hey, guess what? I've already started working on my platform. Maybe I don't have 50 million Instagram followers, but I started an Instagram page that was just for my book and just for my writing process or just for my topic, right? Like consciously engaging in those spaces. Where else? Oh, comp titles. Comp titles is huge. I don't think we've talked about it.
Right.
But if you know what's out there now, you know where your book fits. So, you don't find yourself, I've worked with writers who are, this comp title hunt can really be a tricky one because, you see one of two things happen. Either, oh my God, my book's already been written. I'm demoralized. I can't write anything now. And it's like, okay, we need to talk through that. Or absolutely no book out there is like mine. This is great, which is also a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Because if there is literally nothing like your book at all, unless you really have a remarkable new thing, you got to ask, why isn't there a book like yours? What are you not seeing that's there, right? What are you missing in the market? Because if you don't know what that is before you write the book, you're going to sit down, you're going to write the book, you're going to ship it out to all your publishers who are going to be like, hey, guess what? Let me tell you, we don't publish books like this and there's a reason. Well, actually, if you're lucky, they'll tell you that. But you know what I mean? So I think sitting down with comp titles before you start to write so you know where you want to position yourself can be really, really helpful. I was working with a writer this summer and we were talking comp titles before she started writing. And the big thing for her was she was really overwhelmed by the space she wanted to position herself in. Like she wanted to be with all of these kind of like big name influencer books and this one. And then she started saying like, this one doesn't do it. And this one doesn't do it. And this one doesn't do it. And I was like, hold on. What you're doing in this conversation is you're identifying where your book fits. That's what comp title research is.
Yeah.
Here's all of the books people know. It's not that they're not good. They're great. That's why we all know them.
Right.
But by articulating what you feel each of them comes up short on, you can then say, now I know my niche. Now when I sit down to write, I am writing to accompany these books in a certain way, right? Comp titles.
Yeah.
I saw the question in the comments, competitive, comparative, but they're not competitive titles. And I think that's important. And you need to be able to articulate to a publisher, these are books like mine or not like mine, recently published, and my book is in conversation with them somehow. And so for this one particular writer, her comp title section, when she comes back around to working on her proposal, is clear, and she knows exactly where her book is going to be in dialogue with 4 or 5 other really key books, because early on we sat down and said, all right, let's read the market. Let's look at what's out there and look at what you're going to be able to do differently. Yeah,
exactly. And I think trying to think of a super generic example would be if I'm writing a book about building better habits for myself, like a comp title might be Atomic Habits, where that's of course going to be a great book. It's what's been like a bestseller since the day it's been out. But if I'm writing maybe a different approach or through different strategies, then that would set my habit building book apart from that one. But I can use that as a, say, okay, this is how this book figures out or solves, gives a solution. But here's how mine is going to be different. So like that's pretty generic.
Or add in too, right? And I think that's the problem with competitive or competitive, whichever the actual long word is, but like, it's not here's how mine's different or mine's better. It's just, here's how mine enters the conversation that people who read these books are already engaged in and interested in.
Yeah. Because I think there's you can even think about the fact or like the way that your like personality can, come and join that conversation, because again, it might be maybe not necessarily super different ideas or concepts, but the way that you are communicating it might speak better to a certain demographic of people that the other book just maybe can't reach. So I think there's a lot of value in taking the time to do that, both to let a publisher know, hey, this is how my book is gonna, reach this reader. It's also helpful with the marketing side too, because then you've learned how to differentiate your message to the right audience.
And you can say, right, did you love Atomic Habits? Well, my book is Atomic Habits, if it was written by Tina Fey. Right? Yeah. Or like What's your angle? What are you doing differently? You can talk about it now.
Yeah.
Because you can reference the thing everybody knows, and then you can reference your book as part of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. So thinking about, for an author who's taking the steps for creating a book proposal, maybe on the earlier side, maybe before the book is written, what would you say to someone who might encounter some like feedback or suggestions that they might not agree with from an agent or from a publisher?
Well, I mean, as we all know, awesome, you got feedback. Like, and I don't mean that with any disrespect to agents and publishers. Like, people are busy. This is a business. And, you know, a lot of times you don't hear. A lot of times your proposal goes out. And so when you get feedback, appreciate the feedback, even if it's not the feedback you wanted, always from, you know, the powers that be
Yeah.
in your book's future. And I think, right, most nonfiction writers are working on a proposal before the book is finished. You know, maybe not before they've started writing, but you should be thinking about a proposal a few chapters in, unless you're writing memoir, right? Because in memoir, you're going to need a full memoir, most likely shortly within the time span of submitting your proposal. But if you're writing a business book, an academic book, if you're, you know, doing self-help or anything like that, once you're a couple chapters in, once you've got the flow, you should be thinking about and working on that proposal, because part of the proposal says, I'm not done yet, right? Which is awesome. And it opens up the space for that feedback for an agent or publisher to come in and say, I liked this part of it, but I don't like this part of it. Like, well, guess what? You haven't written all 75,000 words yet, so you can adapt, and it's great. I don't know. I think listen to what they're asking for, because they are focused. As much as you might feel demoralized by something an agent or a publisher says, keeping in mind their only goal for your book, their only goal is that it sells on the other end, right? Fundamentally, that's their interest. I mean, hopefully they like you and they love your book and they're only going to work with you because they believe in your book, and there's all of that. But fundamentally, at the end of the day, they more than you want your book to be sellable. So if their advice is something is missing, or I'm not sure who the reader is, or what genre is this really, listen, because that means they're trying to envision it for you in the market and they don't see it there yet. And they're telling you why. So take that advice and really run with it.
Yeah. What would you say? So beyond the fact that most publishers will require a proposal from an author, what are some of the other, and I think we've covered some of these a little bit, but what would you say some of the biggest benefits would be for an author to still go through that proposal process, regardless of the fact that a publisher is going to want one in the future?
I mean, you're learning more about your book by writing a proposal, because you're stepping away from the pages. You're getting out of the like trenches of being right here with your story, and a proposal forces you to kind of step back. Also, if you are planning to send it out to a small press, to an indie press, to even some hybrid presses, if you are thinking at any point you may send it out to someone else who's not you, they're going to ask for pieces of it. And I think one of the things that gets writers down about proposals is because there is no unified proposal. It's, you know, everybody wants something different. Why do I need to have a centralized document? And I think the answer is you have a centralized document so that when one proposal wants 2,500 words of this and somebody else wants, you know, 1,000 words on whatever, you have the draft pieces of that you can finagle, right? And so it's less overwhelming, and you're not constantly starting from scratch, or you're not opening up that like document that you sent to somebody else that you're going to like cut and paste and like you weren't really sure what you used it for. Like, no, like organize your fundamentals. And then from there, you can do so much. You really can adapt so that when you send a query letter, you know, that you can pull a paragraph that maybe was from your overview. When, you know, somebody says, drop this into a form on, you know, some sort of managing what have you, you have pieces that you can work with.
Yeah. I I feel like this is something that I would come across on the publisher side would be, I think what I like the best way to like say it would be maybe some embellishments when, especially when it comes to some of the like maybe marketing ideas or strategies. What, what, I mean, what do you like? What would you say for someone who maybe they've gotten um, like feedback from an agent saying, oh, maybe like how can we make this a little bit like a little bit better? But because in your opinion, the honest route's going to be the best route. But I mean, is that something like have you come across those types of situations with people who've wanted to like, embellish some of those areas a little bit?
Do not write in your marketing plan that you're going to be on the Today Show.
Yeah.
Unless somehow Savannah Guthrie is your cousin, right? Like, I mean, and even then, I'm not sure you can guarantee it. Honesty and not overpromising.
Yeah.
And I think the hesitation for writers is we hear all this drumbeat about platform.
Yeah.
I'd like to think, I don't know if you're seeing it. I feel like I'm starting to see that get fractionally quieter. I don't know. That's maybe more just anecdotal on my end, but I think authors, if they hear nothing else, they hear that you need to have a platform. And so you say, all right, well, I don't have a platform yet, but my dream platform is I will be on this podcast or that podcast, and I will build up an email list and I will send them an email every day for 4 months leading up to my, you dream big, but only write the actionable steps that you have control over in that marketing plan. And you definitely, I understand the impulse as you do. You don't want an agent or a publisher to be like, well, that person can't do much, and so they're not going to consider you. And so the instinct, like you say, is like, oh, I'll put more in. You also don't want to find yourself in a situation where you've made promises you can't keep.
Right.
And you find yourself in that really awkward conversation of like, oh yeah, no, in the end, I still only have 50 people on my email list.
Yeah.
You don't want to be there.
Yeah. I think I feel like I've seen cases of we're in this huge campaign, in the next 2 years we're gonna have this many people, and or like, oh well, I met so and so at a conference once, and so they're definitely gonna promote my book for me. And I think it causes a lot of frustration both for publishers, but then that then bleeds back to the author when you get to the time the book is coming out and everyone's like, so thought we saw something about this a couple years ago, like where is it? Or we're still waiting for this to happen because we thought it was going to. And yeah, I think that's something, at least like on the publisher side, I had a few experiences with I think the embellishment piece that really caused a lot of frustration all around.
Yeah, I mean, dreaming big is important, and over delivering is also important. And I do think there's ways to work maybe into a bio. Things like, I attend, right? If we're thinking in terms of business, your bio may include that piece that you want to think of as marketing, to say that we're at the beginning of, this big 2-year-long campaign, but you're not promising anything on it, but you're sharing that as a key piece of information. So publisher understands the sphere, right? Or I've worked for this company, and still have those connections. Unless you can guarantee it, if you want to work it in and say, I hope to, approach them in some way and hedge that, I encourage writers to do that. Like, don't exclude, if you're writing a leadership book and you happen to have been on, a VP at a Fortune 500 company, don't leave it out.
Right. Exactly.
But don't promise that you will guarantee that, they'll have you on C-SPAN, or not C-SPAN, whatever the financial thing is. So there's that. But you bring up a really good point though. Like, I met somebody at a conference, or I met somebody at a thing. One thing that you should use, that if you do have in your back pocket, right? If you have someone of significance to your topic that has already promised and guaranteed you something, that goes in a proposal, right?
Yeah.
So if you met James Clear at a conference and you talk to him about your new book on habits and he was fascinated and said, absolutely, put me down. I would love to blurb it. Definitely include that in the proposal. Right. And again, that gets its own space. I'm sure you've seen it done lots of ways, but I encourage writers to like give space too. Maybe it's at the end of the overview, maybe it's the beginning of a marketing plan, depending on the kinds of contacts you have. I have one writer who has a very significant and relevant person to her book who is willing to write the introduction.
Awesome.
And so that goes in the proposal, right? That's, so name drop when you can, but only when you can guarantee it.
Yeah, definitely. What do you think in terms of appearance? Do you think just like a simple getting the information out there in a simple looking document is enough, or would you lean more towards getting something a bit more like designed or branded towards that maybe author's personality or like personal brand?
I think it might depend on the book. I am of the opinion personally that simpler is better because you have to think about the reader. There are ways to impress with your personality that do not involve, a hot pink border on your book proposal.
Yeah.
And I understand that, and there are certainly situations maybe in which that's relevant. But generally speaking, this is a business plan. It's not your creative work. Your creative work is the book, and the business plan has to get people to the creative thing. It doesn't need to be the creative thing.
Yeah. Because I think that can probably sometimes be that intimidation factor of like, oh, well, I don't know how to make things look nice. So I think sometimes that's that barrier of someone saying, maybe I'm just not going to pursue it or I'm not going to do it. But I think knowing that it can be done in a simpler way might help more people take that next step.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be fancy. It's lengthy. Book proposals are not short, but it doesn't need to be fancy. And the space for expressing yourself is in the sample chapters. You're including samples of your work. If somehow your work is visual, you're including, maybe visual descriptions. Maybe there's a reason to include some images that would go along with the chapter or the kinds of things. I mean, if there's a creative space that you need to express, the sample section is the space for that. I would not advise, dropping illustrations into your overview, but as I sit here, I'm like, I haven't worked with anybody, but I'm wondering in terms of like, if you're writing a graphic novel history, which there's some really phenomenal ones out there, I'm wondering about how you would actually work a proposal differently. There could be really specific niches in which, the nature of your book lends itself to a different sort of proposal. But I think those would be very, very, very few and far between.
Yeah. And you mentioned that it kind of depends. Different publishers will ask for maybe different pieces, but what's the average page range that proposals usually end up being?
Not including sample pages. I mean, I would think if you're less than 20 pages, you might be missing something. Okay. I don't know. Maybe that's wrong. 1, 2, 3. I don't know. 20 seems like a really nice number to me. Just off the top of my head. I've certainly worked with shorter and I've worked with longer, but it should be, you've got a title. I could sit here and run off numbers, but there are parts of your proposal that are going to be lengthier. If your marketing section is a paragraph, it's too short. It's got to be a page or so. You have to be able to talk about it. If your bio should be a page, your overview, probably a couple pages so that you can expand and cut as you need for different people. Your annotated table of contents, could run you a couple pages. So, I mean, it adds up really, really quickly. And I mean, at least in terms of, especially if you have the opportunity to have someone trusted, review it. More is better to start
Yeah.
with, and cut it back. Less is leaving something out somewhere inevitably. You should, I don't know. I feel like you should be able to talk about your reader for like half a book length. Like, and that's just me. Like, you should have loads to say about them. And your comp titles, give them a solid, if you're giving them a couple sentences each, you've, 5-6 comp titles, that's a couple pages. It adds up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And now I feel like I'm being really intimidating by saying all of that.
No, but I think it's helpful I think it's more not knowing is scarier, I think, than saying, okay, maybe that, on paper sounds like a lot of work, but then having though that idea to say, okay, well now I've at least got that benchmark. So I feel more confident that I'm not leaving stuff out. So I do think it's helpful for people to have at least the concept of knowing.
And there isn't a right answer though. Like, that's the thing. If, there is not a correct answer. I've seen shorter, I've seen longer. I'm sure you have too.
Yeah. Yeah. I've probably seen some that are like 5 pages, that not including like sample writing, but I mean, then it just stays like super brief, doesn't give a lot of context. So then it just leaves a lot of, I would say, like more questions than answers. So but yeah, I've seen all sorts of lengths.
Yeah.
Well, I guess what's your process like when you're working with a new author? Like what point is like the best point for them to come to you for help with either book coaching or help with, I know you mentioned you start with the proposal. So what's kind of that ideal point in the process for someone to reach out to you?
I mean, for me personally, when it comes to proposals, I work with writers at 2 points. I work with writers when they're starting to write. And so we basically mock out a proposal and then they jump in. But then I also work with a lot of writers who know they need a proposal. They have gotten to a point in their process, or sometimes I've actually had writers who have had an agent reach out to them through maybe a really strong author platform, a podcast or social media presence, and an author or an agent has said, hey, do you have a proposal for a book on this topic that you seem to be such an authority on? And then they're like, oh my God, now what? So that those moments when maybe you've written your manuscript and you hit that wall, and the proposal is the thing that you're like, I spent all this time, I learned how to write a book about habits, and I don't know how to write a book proposal. And so to come in there, and I think the advantage of working with someone on a proposal is, for most people, it's such a foreign kind of document. And it's really, really hard to give yourself the objectivity that you need in it, because you are just so close to the book and you know everything. And, kind of like I said a moment ago, you should be able to like write for pages and pages about your reader. For me, one of the things that I think my writers find helpful when I work with them on proposals is that a lot of it's dialogue. And so, you might look at a blank page and say, oh my God, I need to write 2 pages about my reader. Yeah, all right, let's sit and talk. Tell me all about your reader. And okay, now that's kind of open. And now that's a little bit less scary. Just go write. We just talked about this for 30 minutes. Get off the call, go write down what you remember. Like that. Sometimes that can just be a really nice starting point. And having that space to bounce around. I would say comp titles is the hardest thing for most of the writers that I work with.
Mm-hmm.
We can work through reader and figure out the audience and then go looking for stats when we can find them. Marketing is always just going to be overwhelming and stress everybody out. But comp titles tends to be a space where people are like, I just don't get it. And so I think having people to talk to, a coach to work with, an editor to work with, a marketer to work with, to say, what am I doing here? Does this seem, does this comp? And again, like, this book is about habits, my book is about habits. They must be comp titles. Maybe they aren't. I don't know. Like, I mean, there's a lot of nuance there to be able to, land the book in the right spot when it comes to those.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. if anyone has further like book proposal questions, I think it was great that we were able to explain, I think dive into comp titles. One thing I'm always guilty of, I don't know if you feel the same, is I feel like I'll just use publishing lingo like left and right, not really remembering that someone may not know all of that, like all of the different, like, I guess, insider baseball stuff. All right, question. If you have no experience in marketing, what's the industry specific language to use?
Erin.
Yeah, I can take that. So I guess thinking about marketing, there's different lenses you can look through. So one could be social media. So thinking, even you've got the obvious things like, number of followers that you might have, or maybe the number of platforms that you're on. But I would dig even deeper and say, this is what my engagement looks like. So I'm getting, this percentage of people who are engaging with my posts, or if you're posting a lot of videos, they might be reaching people beyond your, even your current following. So if you're super consistent with getting content out there, you might have then a larger reach than you have a following, or you might have 80% of people who are following you engaging with your content. Those are metrics that a publisher will want to know. And it's also helpful for you to have that in mind so that you can say, okay, wow, like people are really connecting with the type of content that I'm creating. I think sometimes it's just, you can sometimes have these maybe large following, like follower numbers, and it can sound really flashy, really exciting to have, 20,000 followers. But then if you're getting 2% engagement on the content that you're posting, that's actually, there might need to be something that changes there, because then your content might not be connecting then with this audience that you've built up over a long amount of time. So I would say, in terms of like specific language to be looking for when you're pulling some of the different marketing data is, what are your what's the follower count? What's the actual reach that your content is getting? Because it might actually go beyond the people who are following you. But then also, what's the engagement like? What's that percentage, so that you can actually show a publisher, I have people who are actually invested in the content that I'm putting out. The same thing can be said for email. You can have, X amount of subscribers, but then what's the open rate like? Are people actually opening these emails that you're sending? Because those are just going to be the metrics that, to someone who's investing in your book as a business move, they want to know, is this a good investment? Are people actually listening to what you're saying? But then I think you can also think about marketing in terms of some of the relationships, and we talked a little bit about like the influencer network. So if there are people who are in your corner, guaranteed in your corner, that's something I think that could also go, in that, marketing section, to say, these are my connections. This is what my network looks like, and what I can kind of guarantee can come out of this network. So marketing, it's so broad, but I would say the more granular you can get with some of the different different metrics, that just the better it's going to turn out for you in the long run, because you're actually showing a publisher, and even you're showing yourself, this is actually resonating with the people that I'm talking to. I hope that answered the question.
Data's power, right? I love that you say it's for the publisher and for yourself as an author.
Yes, and that's because I think that's what I love about you suggesting to authors to be doing these proposals as early as possible, is that it does give you that, it gives you that look into, okay, what I'm saying is connecting, so I can move forward with confidence, maybe in these topics, in these ideas. If you are digging into your stats and seeing, oh, I'm actually not getting a lot of engagement on some of this content, maybe I need to start rethinking what I'm talking about. Or maybe this audience that I've built up over time, maybe there was a point where you pivoted what you were talking about, and now you've maybe built up an audience who they don't have as much interest in maybe this new path that you're taking. And that's just something that authors need to know so that you can have the proper expectations when it comes time to putting the book out into the world.
Which is why I think working on a proposal early is valuable, because you can look down the road, right? You don't have to wait until you've written it and a publisher or an agent or someone says, you know, have you looked at, you know, who's reading your emails, or have you published anything elsewhere, right? Instead, if you're at the beginning, like, oh, I need to build up my marketing, I need to make sure I have these lines or these avenues, and, or, you know, maybe I do post an op-ed somewhere or publish or whatever, or you know, there's just, you can see the avenues at the start instead of waiting until the end and going, I don't have them, which I think sometimes really freaks people out when they get to the proposal and go, I don't have these pieces. Well, if you think about what you need to share in the proposal at the beginning, you have time for those pieces. I mean, you got to multitask, but you got time.
Yeah. Another question is it possible to publish a book anonymously and still build a following? I think it's probably easier on the fiction side than nonfiction side. And I know that's a fairly common thing for some fiction authors to do, is to go under a pen name, but then you can still, I think, build up a platform, build up a readership through that pen name. Again, almost taking it on as that alter ego. So still giving that, maybe that name, a personality, and giving them, you know, interests and, you know, even hobbies that they can connect with the target readers of the genre that they're writing in. I would say it's going to be a lot tougher on the nonfiction side. I think, Caroline, do you agree with?
I wouldn't know where to begin with it. Yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. I, you know, unless you somehow have a celebrity tell-all, I'm really not sure how you're able to position yourself in a market that you don't have to be responsible for somehow. I can't off the top of my head come up with a situation in which that would work.
Yeah. And I think it could potentially, in some, like with some memoirs, I actually have seen like a couple of people who have maybe published a memoir anonymously or under a pen name. And I think there's a bit more of a limit or a ceiling that you might hit in that scenario. That's someone who's maybe publishing as themselves, you know, as an expert in their field or in their like in a certain topic, could just take it a few steps further, because they can actually be out there, be in front of an audience more confidently.
And in most nonfiction, it's your authority, right? I mean, you are the person who knows the thing best, and that's why you're writing nonfiction and not a novel. So by stepping away from it, you're inevitably undercutting your own authority.
Yeah. One last question. Are there sample book proposals available somewhere to give an idea of what they should look like in final form?
Oh, so that is they're harder to find, would be my answer. I know that some editors and some coaches have maybe previous clients who've given permission to share after a book has been, say, accepted. And so that just kind of stands as an example of something that worked. There used to be one or two, I can't come up with his name. There was a guy who used to have, every once in a while you'll get an author who will share their book proposal. And there was one guy in particular who's used to be out there, but I went looking for it recently and couldn't find it. One of the problems with it is that everyone is significantly different. What works for one person is not going to work for you. And I think, the frustration of proposals is it'd be great if they were plug and play, and they're kind of not. But I do also understand, like, what does a winning book proposal look like is a really heartening thing. So yeah, I think it might come down to individual people that you work with as a writer who may have permission from their authors, or authors who maybe as they expand their own platforms share book proposals. I think Courtney Mom has shared hers. Trying to think, did Matt Bell share his? He might have. So there's a couple of them.
Yeah, and that's something too. We can take a look and see if we can find those examples. Happy to send those out too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, excellent, Caroline. You've got a writing retreat coming up in a few weeks.
I do, yeah, for nonfiction writers,
which is awesome. So for we'll have this replay up on YouTube. So for anyone who is interested in looking into the writing retreat, whether it's this one or whether it's a future one that you do, or really just any of the book coaching and proposal work that you do, we'll make sure that people have a direct way to connect with you and learn more about your services, because you are an awesome person for someone to have on their team, especially in that time of writing, of getting everything together in a way that's going to help the author themselves, but then also help them for success down the line with a publisher. So I really appreciate your time, your expertise today, and
it's been a pleasure.
Hope everyone got to learn a lot and are more confident now to tackle the book proposal.
Exactly. It's not that bad.
Yeah. Well, excellent.
Thanks for having me, Erin.
Yeah, thank you so much, and hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks for tuning in.
See ya.
Bye.